The year was 1994, and the Super Nintendo Entertainment System was right in the middle of its reign over the video game industry. For those of us alive back then, you might remember Nintendo's Play It Loud campaign, which is one of the most 90s things I've ever gone back to find and watch again. I mean, what's a better way to sell video games than showing a guy getting a wedgie and then having the catchphrase, "Give the world a wedgie."
No running, no spitting, no loud music, no skateboarding, no shouting, no gum chewing, keep off the grass, do not feed
Are the future of America. We're gonna have a good time.
Meanwhile, just a year earlier, Capcom had released the original Mega Man X to critical acclaim, with many reviewers at the time calling it a near-perfect game, and I have to say that I fully agree with that sentiment. However, any great success is often met with a challenge. Knowing they were going to produce another X game, Capcom had to come up with a plan on how to surpass it, and thus production started on Mega Man X2. The two main things the Mega Man X2 production team knew is that they wanted to bring back Zero, and also wanted to introduce the X Hunters, which had existed on paper since before the first X game was even finished. These characters were then aesthetically combined to create the basis for Sigma's design, and not used in the first game. There were originally 4 X Hunters, one being female, but the female Maverick was dropped during production due to budget constraints. X2 released in December 1994 in Japan and January 1995 in the United States to very positive reviews. However, many reviewers believe that it did not surpass the original. Despite this, Mega Man X2 is still regarded to this day as one of the best games on the Super Nintendo. While I never owned this game as a kid, I rented it several times from Snow's Video, which used to be a small-town Indiana mobile home turned rental business. I went back to find a picture of the building, but sadly now it's just a couple of small houses sitting in front of the concrete pad the trailer used to sit on. Now, 31 years later, it's my turn to figure out how it holds up and compares to the original. Let's get into it. First, I'll talk about the graphics. For context, I played this game once for practice with unaltered emulator graphics, then again with 3x emulator resolution for the actual review footage, just because I like it better that way. For this section, I will be referring to the original unaltered graphics. Mega Man X2 looks very similar to the first game, with beautiful sprites, creative backgrounds, and some impressive new elements that we didn't see in the first game. Capcom developers didn't want to waste any time showing these off, as the intro stage boss takes up practically the entire screen and also moves back and forth, with only the head and arms being points that can be interacted with. I remember seeing this for the first time and thinking it was going to be a difficult fight due to how imposing the boss was, only to find out that it was actually one of the easiest fights in the game. In some stages, Capcom even increased the size and scope of the boss battles with taller arenas, or even arenas that change, like Morph Moth, where the boss and the boss's room completely change halfway through the fight. In other stages, like Wheel Gator and Magna Centipede, the boss even disappears from the screen for an amount of time before reappearing. One of the things that impressed me the most, despite the fact that it's a fairly useless mechanic, is in the Wire Sponge stage, where the crystal balls can be shot with elemental weapons to change the weather in the stage. Speaking of stage aesthetic, I will say that the game is hit and miss for me in that category. Some levels like Flame Stag, Wire Sponge, and Wheel Gator I found very unique and interesting. But most of the levels don't quite stand out to me for some reason, as many of them did in the original X1. The X Hunter stages also look the same to me, just with a different layout, which I found kind of monotonous and a missed opportunity for each boss to have their own level aesthetic. I'm also not sure why Capcom decided to have the final stage of the game be right back in Magna Centipede stage, but I will say the final fight with Sigma, while really easy, is a cool look at the new CX4 chip that allowed developers limited access to 3D effects. Overall, I think the game looks great, and I would rate the graphics as I would in the first game. As I mentioned in my Mega Man X1 review, the music was one of my favorite parts of the game. As I played through Mega Man X2, I immediately remembered many of the stage themes as I went through them. I remember as a kid thinking that the bangers were Wheelgator, Magna Centipede, and the track for the X-Hunter stages. +30 years later, and my opinion hasn't changed one bit. There are other tracks like Overdrive Ostrich and Morph Moth that I can't remember at all after I finish the stage. I wouldn't say music here is overall as good as Mega Man X, but definitely a fun soundtrack to listen to. Regarding the sound effects, they are once again great. However, there's really nothing different from Mega Man X1 and X-Buster blasts. Taking damage, losing a life, and everything else sounds pretty much the same. So I'll simply say that the gameplay sounds are nice and serviceable. Now here's where Mega Man X2 shines the most, the gameplay and difficulty. For me, the first X game was too easy, except maybe for the crazy damage that Kaiser Sigma does. X2 is a definite step up in difficulty in several parts of the game. For starters, Mega Man X can be completely finished without ever doing a single dash wall kick, which is how I first beat it as a kid, not knowing that I could even do that move. That's not the case in X2, where speed is your friend in many parts of the game, specifically when having to be faster than a tower of fire below you, or when a robot is closing walls in on you. Getting proficient with X's movement is one of the big keys of success to the game. In fact, most people map the dash button to R to make this easier, but me being me, I like to do it the hard way, and ground dash with the D-pad double tap, or dash wall kick rotating my thumb downward and pressing A and B at the same time. The thing that adds the most difficulty to X2, however, is the addition of fighting X-Hunters in regular Maverick stages. If you want to get everything that this game has to offer, these 3 extra Mavericks have to be defeated before progressing to a certain point in the game, and they rotate between which stage they appear in every time you go back to the Maverick select screen. It's completely feasible that the player could have an X-Hunter appear in a stage like Morph Moth, where not only do you have to fight 2 mini-bosses plus Morph Moth himself, but also have to deal with the likes of Violin in the middle of all that, just like I did. As the player progresses through the game and gets upgrades, however, the game does become easier with health refills and damage reduction, not to mention the super secret power that can be obtained later in the game. In fact, I would say that this version of X's arm power-up is by far the best out of the first 3 games. Overall, for me, I think X2 outdoes X1 in gameplay and difficulty, and is one of the most well-balanced X games in the series regarding the challenge that it puts in front of the player. Finally, we come to the story, which is always the shortest part of a Mega Man review. We didn't come here for the story, you know. But if you don't want to know any of this, now's the time to move to the next section. Anyway, the game takes place 6 months after the original, with X finding himself still tracking down Mavericks after Sigma's defeat. In a cutscene, the game shows you there are 3 nefarious individuals plotting something bigger and trying to distract X while biding time. While fighting these hunters in Maverick stages, X can obtain 3 parts of Zero's body to give to Dr. Kane to rebuild Zero, as Dr. Kane still has Zero's internal drives, memory, and CPU. If the player collects all 3 of these, the real Zero will come back to save X from fighting a black Zero copy during the final stage. If not, X will have to fight Red Zero, who Sigma brought back to do his bidding before finishing off Sigma. The game does give the first hint that Zero was created by Dr. Wily, as X was created by Dr. Light, thus adding more connection between the 2 game series. The story is fine for what it is, but it isn't and never was intended to be the shining star of any Mega Man game. Thus, we come full circle back to the original question. Is Mega Man X2 better than Mega Man X1? My answer is yes and no. The increased challenge, air dash, and armor upgrades are all superior to the first game. However, I don't find the music, bosses, or levels as enjoyable, and the game feels like it was rushed just a bit more than X1, which I initially gave a 9.5 in that review, and I would encourage you to check that review out if you haven't done so already. For those reasons, I give Mega Man X2 an objective 9 out of 10, which is a score that still reflects how great of a game it is. I hope you enjoyed this review, and if so, please leave me a comment and a like, or even consider subscribing. Thank you for coming by, and please do look forward to my eventual review of the final Super Nintendo X game, Mega Man X3. We'll see you next time.